If you have joined us in our journey through the Daily Bible, we are completing week 7 of this great undertaking. I would say that we're almost through the Pentateuch, but well, that's not quite true. The Pentateuch is the first 5 books of the Old Testament. It's also called the Torah, the books of the law. What I'd like for us to do is to just be reminded of these 5 books and what they mean. What we have is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Genesis gets its name from, well, the fact that it is beginnings. It's the first couple of words in the Hebrew Testament, in the beginning. The book of Exodus is what it says it is. It is an exit. It's a departure of the Israelites from Egypt. Leviticus gets its name because it has a lot of messages that relate to the Levites, to the priestly tribe. Then the book of Numbers, well, it's because it has a lot of numbers, specifically 2 census as part of that book. And as we have read through Numbers, we know it's quite a bit. Tonight we're coming to the book of Deuteronomy, and I've got a lot to say about that name, but for right now, just let me tell you, Deuteronomy means repetition of the law. Repetition of the law. Like I said, we're not quite through yet, because what F. LaGard Smith does, I think he does an excellent job with this, is beginning, well, in a couple of days, we'll start going through its 2-week plus journey of the Old Testament law. But what he does is he divides them up by categories. It makes it much easier to understand. I think it makes for very fluid reading, so I really like the way that he's done that. So I'm looking forward to that time, and the fact that our studies over the next couple of Sunday nights will deal with the Old Testament law. Now, back to our book that's the focus of our study tonight, the book of Deuteronomy. What I thought we'd do is just go through and have an old-fashioned book study. It's been a lot of our reading over this past week, and I thought it might help us because Deuteronomy has a lot of review to it, that it would help us as we can look and just kind of see where we've been as part of the Exodus and the wilderness wanderings. So it's repetition of the law. In Hebrew, the Hebrew title of this book is These Are the Words. And it's because it's the first couple of words of the text in Deuteronomy, and that's what that means. So that's how the Hebrew title came about. The word Deuteronomy has a really interesting background. It's based on Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 18. But in the Greek translation of the Old Testament, it's called the Septuagint, there was a problem in the translation of this verse. What we read today out of the New International Version says, He is to write for Himself on a scroll a copy of this law. That sounds great, hence the repetition of the law. But the mistranslation called this the second law instead of copy of this law. That's pretty significant because this is not a second law. This is a repeated rendering of it. It is maybe a second offering of it, but it's the same law. It's not a second law. So the word Deuteronomy has its own little controversy even surrounding that name. What we find in the book of Deuteronomy, some great study for us. We come to a clear understanding, regardless of the title, that this is a second giving of a law. Deuteronomy is seen as, well, a farewell sermon, more than likely more than one sermon of Moses to the Israelites. Moses delivers this sermon or these series of lessons, and it is intended to be written down so that it can be shared with the Israelites in future generations. Deuteronomy chapter 31 verse 9 tells us, So Moses wrote down this law and gave it to the Levitical priests who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord and to all the elders of Israel. So it was intended to be given to the Levites so that they would have that for future reference to go back and read. Down a couple of verses, Deuteronomy chapter 31, verses 24 through 26. After Moses finished writing in a book the words of this law from beginning to end, he gave this command to the Levites who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Take this book of the law and place it beside the ark of the covenant of God. The goal is that Moses wanted to make sure that this message could be shared with future generations of Israelites. As we read through the book of Deuteronomy, I need to go ahead and mention this, that it is traditionally thought that the last section of this book was probably written by Joshua. It would be the part that included some of the transition of power, but particularly involved the notice and the news of Moses' death and the official transition of power, of leadership, and that would have been added by Joshua at that particular time. Deuteronomy recounts the Israelites' experience in the wilderness as well as the Old Testament law. Here's a key point as we begin, is that Deuteronomy tells us a lot about God. Tells us a lot about God. Let me go ahead and give you this information. The book of Deuteronomy is specifically quoted 40 times in the New Testament. That makes it number 3 as far as Old Testament books and number of quotes. The only books ahead of it would be Psalms and Isaiah. So Deuteronomy is a popular book as far as being quoted, direct quoting in the New Testament. Deuteronomy reveals a great deal about God. Let's look at some of those verses, shall we? Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. We have so many other religions that are man-made religions in other countries that were polytheistic, that were multi-God. What the Lord wanted us to know is that the Lord our God, the Lord is one. He is the great I am. He is the Lord. That's Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. Chapter 4, verse 24. For the Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. This is an aspect of God's character that is important for us to understand. When we make this commitment to follow the Lord, when we look in the Old Testament and God said that I will be your God, you will be my people, and the Israelites agreed to that, God didn't have any desire to see them go and worship a golden calf. God didn't have any desire to see them bow down to any false idols or false gods. He's jealous. He wouldn't have any of that. And as we read through the Old Testament, it becomes pretty clear that He didn't have any of that. Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 9. Know therefore that the Lord your God is God. He is the faithful God, keeping His covenant of love to 1,000 generations of those who love Him and keep His commandments. God says what He means, and He means what He says. Chapter 7, verse 13. He will love you and bless you and increase your numbers. He will bless the fruit of your womb, the crops of your land, your grain, new wine, and olive oil, the calves of your herds, and the lambs of your flocks and the lands He swore to your ancestors to give you. Man, God's going to love you. Just in the same way that God took care of you, He's going to continue to take care of you. Why? Because He loves you. Deuteronomy 4, verse 31, for the Lord your God is a merciful God. He will not abandon or destroy you or forget the covenant with your ancestors, which He confirmed to them by oath. This is a word that has meant a lot to me lately when I think about God and His relationship, even with us today. is that God's merciful to us. That means there were times when we deserved punishment for sin, and God did not do that. In fact, instead of punishing us, He sent His Son to die on the cross so that our sins might be forgiven. An incredible act of mercy and of grace. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 15. For the Lord your God who is among you is a jealous God, and His anger will burn against you, and He will destroy you from the face of the land. Oh, you see, now we have to balance this out. This is a total picture of the Lord, of what Moses is presenting in the book of Deuteronomy. And you need to understand this. He's telling them, you need to be faithful to the Lord. Understand who He is. He's one, He loves you, but boy, He's jealous. He doesn't want you bowing down and worshiping any idols or false gods. And if you disobey Him, understand, while there are blessings that come when you obey the Lord, there are consequences that come when you disobey the Lord. There were times, we remember, through the wilderness wanderings that the Israelites tested that theory, and unfortunately, they found out that God said what He meant, and He meant what He said. This is the God who called Israel to Himself. If you've been reading in the book of Deuteronomy, here's a phrase that you've noticed. Moses repeated the phrase, the Lord your God. The Lord your God. It's repeated some 250 times in the book of Deuteronomy. That's an amazing number, isn't it? But I know that as we were reading over the past couple of nights, it was a phrase that just continually came up. All these blessings will come on you and accompany you if you obey the Lord your God. Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 2. Chapter 10, verses 12 and 13. And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you but to fear the Lord your God and to walk in obedience to Him, to love Him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and to observe the Lord's commands and decrees that I am giving you today for your own good. Deuteronomy chapter 10, verses 12 and 13. So what we see there is just the importance of this healthy fear of God. Well, what does it mean to fear God? It means that we hold Him, we recognize His greatness and His awesomeness. It is a healthy fear that has us honoring and respecting Him. We respect His power. We fear His power. We fear His greatness. That's how we come and we worship before Him. And we learn that this is not something just to take casually. That when we come to worship the Lord, well, God means business. And when we come to worship Him in spirit and in truth. What I'd like to do now is go through an outline of the book of Deuteronomy. This is from Warren Wiersbe's book, Be Equipped. It's a book on the book of Deuteronomy. Wiersbe does a great job of outlining material. And I think you'll see that tonight as we go through. We're going to divide Deuteronomy into 5 categories: remembering God's blessings, responding to God's goodness, reviewing of God's Word, renewing God's covenant, and replacing God's servant. You can also tell he is a master of alliteration as well. I hope you have your outline that was provided in our Sunday announcement sheet. You'll find it very helpful at this point as we go through, because we're not going to be able to talk about all of the aspects of that outline. It makes up a book that's about that thick, and we only have a few minutes together. And the book of Deuteronomy is a rather lengthy book in itself. So let's get started. The first point as we go through the first chapters is remembering God's blessing. Remembering God's blessing. Passages like this in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 30 and 31. The Lord your God, who is going before you, will fight for you as He did for you in Egypt before your very eyes. And in the wilderness, there you saw the Lord your God carried you, as a father carries his son, all the way you went until you reached this place. Then we go to chapter 4, verses 10 through 12. Remember, by the way, if you want to look at one of the great ways of of seeing some main points in the book of Deuteronomy, go to your concordance and look up the word remember, and then just follow that through the book of Deuteronomy. You'll find it's used quite a number of times, and each time critical points are made. Remember the day you stood before the Lord your God at Horeb, when He said to me, assemble the people before me to hear my words, so that they may learn to revere me as long as they live in the land, and may teach them to their children. You came near and stood at the foot of the mountain while it blazed with fire to the very heavens, with black clouds and deep darkness. Then the Lord spoke to you out of the fire. You heard the sound of words, but saw no form. There was only a voice. So what we see in this first section, remembering God's blessing, is that God led them, God came to them, and God taught them. Three of the subpoints under this main idea of remembering God's blessings. He led them, He came to them, and He taught them. When we move to the second part of the outline, we will focus on responding to God's goodness. Now this goes about from chapter 6 through chapter 11. Again, let's look at some ideas that take us to this idea of the outline. How should we respond to God's goodness? Great question. Chapter 6, verses 4 and 5. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. What's our response? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. What is a proper response for God's people, for what He's done for us? Love God. As we go through and read in the book of Deuteronomy, following this particular part of the outline, what you'll find in chapter 6 is love God. Chapter 7, you need to obey God. Beginning to notice that's an important part in the book of Deuteronomy as well. Chapter 8, how do we respond to God's goodness? Well, we respond with gratitude and thanksgiving. This is the part in chapter 8 where he talks about, he said, man doesn't live by bread alone. God provided all this food for you. Your sandals didn't wear out. Your clothes didn't wear out. God took care of you. And a proper response to that, for everything that He provided, is to be thankful, to live lives of gratitude. And then when we come to chapters 10 and 11, there's a focus on fearing God. And as I said earlier, I think that's a key word for us to learn to understand. When we start talking about what it means to fear God, probably an aspect of our worship that we could really work on this one, of understanding as we come before the Lord of His greatness, His power, His authority, His sovereignty. Friends, we serve a great God. And I know we live in a very casual society today where we just talk to one another, and we do need to understand that as we go to the New Testament, Jesus taught us to call God our Father, a very intimate relationship with the Lord. But let there be no doubt that when we pray, we are talking to the Creator of all the universe. Great and holy God. So our outline through Deuteronomy, we need to remember God's blessings. We need to respond to God's goodness. And then we need to review God's Word. Now, this is the part I probably will deal with this less tonight, because this will be the topic of our studies the next couple of Sundays. These are aspects specifically of the law, and if you were to put them in various categories, that what we would see is there are aspects of worship that are addressed specifically in the law. Issues that deal with obedience, again. Issues that deal with civil officials, with the offerings that are brought to the Lord. Cities of refuge is going to be an important aspect, and we'll spend some time talking about that. Cities of refuge, of where if you are accused of a crime, that you are able to go to this city of refuge and you can stay there until there is a judge that comes along that can hear the case to issue a decree of guilt or innocence. But it's a city of refuge, and those were scattered throughout the Promised Land. There's also some information as we go through this section about waging war, and then a final category that we just would classify as miscellaneous laws. Again, more about that in the coming weeks, because this wasn't actually part of our reading over this past week. Remembering God's blessings, responding to His goodness, reviewing of God's Word, and then renewing God's covenant. Well, this is a critical part of our study. This is when we're getting on into the book of Deuteronomy, because the part about reviewing God's Word, chapters 12 through 26, and then you get to verses 27 through 30, is where we start talking about renewing God's covenant. When we get to 28 and 29, really interesting. You get to chapter 28, I'm going to read the first 6 verses, where Scripture says, "If you fully obey the Lord your God and carefully follow all of His commands I give you today, the Lord your God will set you high above all the nations on the earth. All these blessings will come on you and accompany you if you obey the Lord your God. You will be blessed in the city and blessed in the country. The fruit of your womb will be blessed, the crops of your land and the young of your livestock, the calves of your herds and the lambs of your flocks. Your basket and your kneading trough will be blessed. You will be blessed when you come in and blessed when you go out." Moses is making the point here is that if we walk in obedience to the Word of God and to the covenant, he's telling the Israelites, he's saying, man, things are going to go well for you. That part takes up just a little bit more, but a small section of chapter 28. And then for the rest of 28 and all of 29, what we will find out is the consequences that come, the curses that come if we disobeyed, or the Israelites specifically, if the Israelites disobeyed the covenant, that there would be consequences for that. Now, I went ahead and kind of jumped to some application, because I think that there are promises in the New Testament, that there are promises if we walk in obedience to the Lord, if we live faithfully with Him. There are things that we can know this. We can know God hears our prayers. We can know about the future and the assurance of heaven. But understand this, there are also curses that come. There are consequences for disobedience. They were very specific in Deuteronomy. And for us, well, they're eternal in nature when we start dealing with that in the New Testament. Powerful passage of obedience, disobedience, the blessings and the cursings. Finally, we want to get to the part where we talk about replacing God's servant. It was a real big issue of who was going to follow Moses. And that question is answered in the book of Deuteronomy. It would be Joshua, son of Nun, who was Moses' aide, who had walked alongside Moses all of these years, who had a great understanding. He'd gained some insight that others were not privy to. He had seen, he had learned, he experienced from right there being right beside Moses. So that makes it a natural fit that he would be the next leader. We also recognize this of how important it is for there to be a leader. And if you don't believe that, then pay attention to what happens after Joshua passes away. It's coming up ahead. Deuteronomy chapter 31, verses 7 and 8. Then Moses summoned Joshua and said to him in the presence of all of Israel, "Be strong and courageous, for you must go with this people into the land that the Lord swore to their ancestors to give them, and you must divide it among them as their inheritance. The Lord Himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid and do not be discouraged." That's an important message for Joshua, because we see it coming from Moses here in Deuteronomy 31. In Joshua chapter 1, it's what the Lord will say to Joshua. Then at the end of Joshua chapter 1, it's something that we will hear from the Israelites themselves. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Lord's going to be with you wherever you go. Powerful lesson. So, for all of the time we have followed Moses from his birth through the burning bush to the 10 plagues to the Passover, the Red Sea, the wilderness wanderings, Sinai. Been a great, great journey. But at the end of Deuteronomy, we find out that God calls Moses home, calls him up on the mountain, and there Moses will breathe his last. But there's just something special about these last verses. And what I'd like for us to do as we close our time together tonight is we're just going to go and read the first 7 verses of Deuteronomy 34. I want you just to see what we're going to find out. There was Moses' death, a national time of mourning, but there's something special that takes place here. Let's just go ahead and get to it. Then Moses climbed Mount Nebo, from the plains of Moab to the top of Pisgah, across from Jericho. There the Lord showed him the whole land, from Gilead to Dan, all of Naphtali, the territory of Ephraim and Manasseh, and all the land of Judah as far as the Mediterranean Sea, the Negev and the whole region from the valley of Jericho, the city of palms, as far as Zoar. Then the Lord said to him, "This is the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, when I said, I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you will not cross over into it." And Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in Moab, as the Lord had said. He buried him in Moab, in the valley opposite Beth Peor. But to this day no one knows where his grave is. Moses was 120 years old when he died, yet his eyes were not weak, nor his strength gone. Moses had been a great leader for the Israelites. He had been a humble servant of the Lord. We have followed his journey. In this passage, we're reminded of that occasion when he hit the rock rather than speak to it in Numbers chapter 20. He did not honor God as holy. But in that passage, we also get to see God's mercy. And by that, what I mean is that we were able to see God wanted Moses to have a glimpse of the land. Moses, this is what you worked for. This is why you led the people. And this is what they will get to enjoy. Before he closed his eyes a final time, Moses was able to look out and to get a glimpse of the promised land.